I am Olivia Dade,
And I'm Ruby Lang.
and we are going to do sort of a joint interview of each other with questions that we chose because we're all about control. Yeah. And it's going to be probably awkward and weird and probably technologically deficient because that is who I am.
On brand as usual, Olivia.
Yes. So, the first thing I think we were going to talk about is potentially doing illustrated covers, because I know that's been a topic of much discussion.
Yes, it has. Now you have two beautiful illustrated covers so far. You want to talk a little bit about the design and your ideas for them and why you decided to go with that?
So my self-published books have illustrated covers. So Teach Me, and then my Desire in the Deep Blue Sea, and then the Tiny House book. And I've actually always loved illustrated covers, but I think that there was, for me, the deciding factor was that the sort of characters that I write, it was going to be very hard for me to find stock photos of particularly a fat woman and a man who may or may not be fat, but have it be them both be attractive and romantically entangled
Yes.
and well lit. So then my choice would then either to have just a man on the cover, but my books tend to be very heroine focused, so that didn't really make sense for me. And then if I just had a woman on the cover, I had heard from various friends that those, I mean, to be mercenary, those don't tend to sell as well. So if I wanted to have a cover with both of them on it, then it seemed to me the best way to get a cover that was not just like a random object that had people on it, which I wanted, particularly since I'm writing fat heroines. I wanted that represented in the cover. The best way to do that was to do an illustrated cover. So that was basically my reasoning behind it. Now yours is through a publisher, so there was
Yes.
less.
There is less. I did not know at first that it was going to be an illustrated cover. I am glad that it is because I have to say, I love them. I love them. They're so cute. They just appeal to, and let us also talk about how looking for through stock photos is deeply
Demoralizing.
unpleasant. It is so
Mhm.
sometimes for my older covers, I did sometimes help look through stock photos in order to help. The editor would ask, well, what do you envision for this? And just finding certain combinations of people who look like they're actually interested in each other.
Imagine that.
For Clean Breaks, for instance, it's a cover I love, but Jake is supposed to have a beard, and they said, and my publisher, Crimson, bless them, they were like, well, maybe we can Photoshop some scruff onto him. He's an Asian man.
Uh-huh.
There's no bearded Asian man.
Right.
In the stock. I mean, maybe it's changed in the last year or 2 years, but it's a little bit ridiculous how limited it is. And then if you do find some, you're sort of like, well, this doesn't at all match up with the characters. It doesn't look like a romance cover. It doesn't convey the tone. There's a lot of things a lot of nuance that you really want the cover to convey, and it's just not there in a lot of stock.
Right.
And you can do that with illustrated covers. You
can
do all of that. You can say, I would like sparks to be coming out of his fingertips, but I would also like an Asian man with a beard.
Yeah, looking at stock photos of fat women, which I did. Now there are certain searches, if you did put fashion in there or beautiful, it helps. But in general, the message of stock photos of fat women, usually they're either holding healthy food to indicate that they are going to be dieting, or they're holding like a cheeseburger or eating like an entire chicken or something to show that the reason that they're fat is clearly because they're, you know, gluttonous. And there's often before and after photos. It actually was. I have a history of disordered eating. I've been I've been pretty upfront about that. It was not a good thing for me to be looking at. So at a certain point, I do look at them for promo graphics, but then I don't look for couples. I just look for one woman and all those fashion, beautiful, to sort of try to weed out a lot of the painful things, because there's a lot of loathing on there.
I mean, it's kind of appalling. Like, if you want to maybe like take a tour of our cultural brain, you know, I'd suggest like just looking through stock photos.
Mm-hmm.
It's
very revelatory.
Very, very revelatory. Yeah.
And you know, I think that there has been a shift too in what illustrated covers indicate as far as sexual content.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
That, you know, when in the 90s maybe, with sort of so-called chick lit, which I hate that term, but that typically an illustrated cover meant limited or very vague sexual content, most closed door. And in recent years, I think that is no longer the case, which I know is often, I think it's a shift for longtime romance readers, which can be disorienting. The one thing I would say is that a lot of non-illustrated covers, I never know what the sexual content is either. Sometimes, I guess, you could tell if it had like naked man chest on it, or if for a while if it had like an orchid. So if it was Georgia O'Keeffe-esque, then you can kind of tell, like, if there's faux vulva on the cover, like, you can tell that's, you know. But in general, if you look at some of my librarian books, there's no way to tell how much sexual content is in there. You know, the covers that Kensington chose. So I understand what people are saying, but I also don't know that that's necessarily different for many non-illustrated covers.
Yeah, I mean, the blurb is probably your best bet always. Again, you know, I mean, I think I have actually tried this with my husband. I was in a store and I was like, I'm gonna try and see if I can tell what kind of content is in this paperback, romance paperback, you know, just by looking at the cover. And I was so sure that I would get it 100%, and I think I only batted around 60. You know, I was flipping through. Oh, dick. You know.
When I worked at a used bookstore, there were certain customers who came in who wanted like very explicit, like Bertram Small, Virginia Henley, like a lot of sex scenes explicit, and I was trying to help them find stuff. So I would flip through, and I usually looked for the words moist or throbbing. If there was throbbing on a page, typically, like, so I could help guide them toward the more explicit content. It was anything for professional obligations. Yeah, I'm all about that. Anything else about illustrated covers?
I think we can. I think I've said my piece.
I have said my piece too. Do you want to talk a little bit about one thing that I know that you wanted to talk about was a little bit about publishing after a hiatus, because both of us have done that.
We have, yes. My last book before Playing House was Clean Breaks, and that came out in early, oh God, I forgot the year, 2016. Maybe it was 2017. 2017. Thank you, me. So it's been an eternity in.
2 years in publishing terms is a long time.
Especially romance publishing, where you know the churn, as they call it. And how long has it been for you?
It was my last book through the Love Struck Librarian series was June 2017, and my first self-published book came out May, so it was 2 years essentially for me as well. Yeah,
and it can feel like you start feeling like the forgotten forgotten one, right? It's like nobody's talking about me, nobody's thinking about me. Why aren't they?
Right.
Why aren't they reading my books? You know, well, I only had 3, so. But it's been hard. Hey, have you heard? The last couple of years have been kind of hard on people.
No, whatever has happened.
Whatever could it be?
How mysterious. Yeah.
Wow.
So during that 2 years, were you still writing, or did you just need some time?
I was writing,
Mm-hmm.
and I also needed time.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the state of it now. I think that we frantically try to write
Mm-hmm.
and don't take the time, and then realize afterwards, oh, maybe we need that. Maybe you have to even stare at the screen for an hour and nothing's happened.
Right.
Maybe I know that I feel very burned out. And I was telling someone else, I think it was Emma Berry on Twitter, I think I was saying, I constantly feel burned out these days, but I feel like I don't have a right to be. And, so my publisher went under, or my imprint went under, and life happened and my ceiling collapsed, my bathroom ceiling. I feel like if I were talking to a friend, I would say, of course, take a break, lady, but also good things happen. I'm not going to say it, but, and then there's the world, which has an impact, and you moved. I mean, God, you moved to a different country, like this is serious stuff anyway, there's a lot of pressure to produce.
There is. And I mean, for me, part of the hiatus was that at the end of the Love Struck Librarian series, I was very unclear as far as how I wanted my future in publishing to look, whether I wanted it to be traditionally published or self-published, because of different things about my experience with those books. So while I was trying to decide what to do about that, I kept writing, but when the election happened, I suddenly was only able to write novellas, which is actually the next thing we plan to discuss. And also read novellas for quite some time. And I just basically just wrote things completely for myself, whatever I wanted to write, stuck them in my pocket, and then... Oh, I should note, I did do 2 novellas for the Rogue Anthology series, and one of which is with Ruby, which the long run is amazing. It's wonderful. I was so proud to be in the same anthology with you. It made me so happy. It really did. I was like, I look at it and I was like, I'm with Ruby.
I was with you.
Oh, it was wonderful.
It was so good.
So I did publish that during that time, which was very nice to have a sense that I had not entirely fallen off the face of the earth. Because again, if you're not publishing for a long period of time, it is very easy to believe that what you have already done can feel very meaningless.
Yes.
Because there are so many great books coming out. Mm-hmm. So many great books have come out. Mm-hmm. And you're a drop in an ocean. And if you don't have new stuff coming out, it can be very disorienting, I would say, to be part of the community but not have anything new for a couple years at a time.
I mean, I started to get to the point where I sort of resent looking at word counts that people had up, and I was just like, oh, that is not happening with me at all, and I would feel very bad for resenting them because, hey, that's great, you're writing, but at the same time, I just, I had to block out the am writing hashtags. I had to had to just take breaks from social media because it felt like, I didn't have the right to be a part of that in a lot of ways. But we worked, come on.
Right.
We did a lot of really good work.
Right. And my particular writing style, which they may ask about later, I think one of our lightning round questions is, I tend to be feast and famine. Mm-hmm. So I tend to work hard when I work. I'm not one of those people who could do 10K a day or whatever, but I do tend to work almost basically every day. I'm in the groove, and the book is usually done within a month or so. But then I may not write at all for 3 months. I mean, it is basically, I sort of consider it leaving the field fallow for a while so that everything can, there's enough there to nourish another book eventually.
That's a good way.
I am not, I'm not one of those folks who, the advice to write every day, that is just not how I function. Maybe at some point that'll change, but it's not what I do. I also have, I've had periods in the past couple of years with issues with anxiety and depression. And there are times where it's just not going to happen. It's just not.
Yeah.
The good news is the things I do to distract myself during those periods usually make it into a book.
Like what?
Well, after the election, I got into randomly tennis. So that is in a book. I got,
That's great.
there was a period where I did nothing but watch, for the first time in my life, watched HGTV for a month. I had never watched it before, and then suddenly that was all I was doing, was watching HGTV, and that is the basis of the Love Unscripted series with Desire in the Deep Blue Sea and Tiny House book. And then more recently, I've been on a fanfic binge, and that is going to show up in various manuscripts, hopefully at some point in the future. So, I mean,
That's so exciting.
we can all enjoy the fruits of, well, the people who like my writing, the people who hate it, sorry. The people who like my writing can enjoy the fruits of my mental health struggles, because it all shows up at some point or another. But it makes me so delighted that we are going to see your books out in the world again, because you're writing.
Oh, thanks.
I say this on Twitter all the time, but it is true. Ruby's writing is not like, she's very sui generis in the sense that she has a very wry humor to her books, and she's unafraid of complicated emotions and difficult emotions, and is willing to sort of trace that through someone's thoughts and their actions, and be unafraid of talking about emotions that aren't easy. And I mean, it's beautifully written as well, but she's unafraid of telling stories that have a lot of depth and that sometimes are not hijinks. When I was writing Teach Me, two of the people who most inspired sort of the writing that most inspired that was you and Emma Barry. Emma, in part because she's so, a lot of her books are very based in, very well grounded in profession and in place, and like really willing to delve deep into setting and profession. And yours, because I wanted to write something that felt very true to life, and to be brave enough to be a little bit quieter in what I had written. And also, point of view, I thought of Joanna Bourne too, although she writes nothing like what I write, but she's amazing.
Yes.
But I find your work, I do think very brave, because again, there are difficult issues you're tackling, it's difficult emotions, and it's just, again, I enjoy hijinks on occasion, but like, that's not,
I love hijinks.
I know. I think you're wonderful. So I'm so glad to see, I mean that. I mean that. So I'm just so glad to see your books in the world again.
And I'm so glad to see yours. I love your clarity of thought too. It's just, sometimes I'll read your books and I will see that line, where the character is just like, I'm thinking of Khan in why is everything?
Oh, driven to distraction.
Driven to distraction. And she's that line of thinking where she's just like, okay, this is who I am, and it's going to play through just so naturally to me. It just came so beautifully to me, and it's so good. Anyway,
well, you helped me with that book, so if it's good, it's partially due to you.
It was already there. Olivia. And the only thing I helped with was just like secondary stuff. So
No,
but
it was. Yes.
And also your sense of humor. I mean, it's like it's the books are so funny. All of these books are so funny, and I love this new phase of yours too. with the quieter stories,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But you haven't, like, but it's still so you, you know.
Right.
You're just, it's just so. You've laid it out there. The characters understand, you know, who they are, in like that sort of, and who they recognize each other in these really deep, fundamental ways. I just love that. I love the way that they see each other and see, you know, that inner core of just like goodness to them. And they're also such good characters too. I love it when I love when characters are good. I know, like, you know, everybody wants like this really dark soul. A lot of people really like the dark soul, you know, the twisted backstory, you know, drama. But like, for instance, Teach Me, you know, Martin, is that his name?
Martin, yes.
Martin. Sorry, I'm so bad with names. Martin is he really sees, God, why can't I remember? Rose. He really sees her, and I just love that. He's like, and the way they sort of come together and just understand each other and really sort of unfold those layers to each other. I love that. And they're just such good characters anyway.
I love reading about well-intentioned people whose conflict
Yes.
does not lie in one of them being a jerk who needs to be redeemed.
And you do that so well.
Well, as do you. I mean, I was thinking of The Long Run, where, I mean, there are people who their conflict arises not from one of them being ill-intentioned.
Right.
Both of them are well-intentioned. The conflict arises from, you know, people come from different backgrounds, different needs, they're in different places in their lives, and that can be a potent source of conflict that can keep people apart or cause misunderstandings without there needing to be a bad guy or a bad person
This is
in
what
there.
I mean by clarity of thought.
Right,
She's
but,
so good
but
at
she
this.
does the same thing, and I think that I really appreciate, and I love that Hard Knocks, like, that you had, you know, talking about the issue of, you know, traumatic, you know, concussions and traumatic brain injuries and so forth. I mean, this is a real, like, her concerns, I'm sorry, I forget, I read it so many years ago, I'm sorry, but it's
I can't
wonderful.
remember my own
But, like,
things.
you know, that her concerns about that, I mean, are legitimate. But his perspective as a hockey player is also, it's not that either one of them is wrong.
No.
It's just that these are hard issues where you can be on different sides of those issues, and it doesn't mean that you're a dick or that you're, you know, it just means that people come from different perspectives and have different backgrounds. And I appreciate that very much. Sorry, this has become a love fest.
I know.
We're completely off of our interview questions.
This is going to be really long, too.
Yeah, it will be. We don't have to do all of it if we
don't
don't
have
want.
to do all of it.
We can skip number 7, especially.
Okay.
So
It's the question for you.
well, so tell me about number. Oh, not talking about number. Do you want to talk a little bit about novellas? Like, what appeals to you about novellas? Writing or reading or any of that?
I love reading them. I love and this is, I do feel like some books are maybe a little too long. Sorry. And I do, and I love the fact that the conflict is sometimes just like a smaller thing, and you get to explore character in them. Also, you know, I think that it has been easier to write them. I'm not going to say easy. It hasn't been easy to write them, but it has been easier to just think of that kind of conflict, the kind that you would put in a novella, and write that, for me personally, just in the last couple of years. And I don't really. Why do you write novellas? Why has that been the thing that you've been doing?
I was thinking yesterday on the train over that I was wondering whether, to me, sometimes people's reactions to novellas are split, I think, in some of the same ways I see people's reactions to say first person present
Mm-hmm.
or first person past.
That's a
There
good
are
point.
some people who are just, when they read a novella, I think even if the novella is quite well written and is paced well, are always going to feel dissatisfied that there's not more story there. And that's legitimate. I mean, everyone has different sort of perspectives on what they're looking for in their ideal story. So there are some people, and that's perfectly legitimate, who just don't like novellas. I love them.
Is it legitimate? Anyway, sorry.
I say it
Is
is.
this the polarized?
That's what I say it is. But I love novellas because number one, after the election, my attention span tanked,
Oh God. Yeah.
and it let me keep reading. I love it because often one of the tricks of writers in writing novellas is that it's easier to start with characters who already know one another. So you often have ones who work together or who are neighbors or who are friends, and friends to lovers is my absolute catnip because I'm not big. Angst makes me very stressed, and so does like bitterness. And so, like, hard issues that would take an entire book to solve, sometimes I just want like people who already kind of like each other or at least are connected. And so a lot of my favorite tropes show up in novellas. And they don't tend to have as much high level angst and drama. And particularly if I'm, you know, like I said, after the election, I couldn't handle a lot of drama. As far as writing them, it was an attention span issue. It allowed me to keep writing in a way that didn't feel overwhelming to me, and also gave me a certain sense of accomplishment on a regular basis.
That's true.
Without having to wait, months to have something. I could have it felt doable to me when a lot of things did not feel doable to me. So, and it does, I really do enjoy them.
I do too, I have to say.
I mean, other authors have told me, and I think this is true, that they don't tend to sell as well, and they don't tend to make as much money because, of course, there's a lower price point.
Yeah.
But I really, there have been stretches of my life, in the recent history, where basically I went through my TBR and just read all the novellas. It didn't matter if they were historical or contemporary or paranormal. I was like, I would check the page count, and if it was above a certain page count, I'm like, I can't. Even if it's great, even if it was great, I knew that at some point I would no longer be able to keep reading, that it would become too much. So I was like, I gotta do something I can read in one sitting. Even if it's a long sitting.
Do you think you would? Are you a person who tends to write more than the word count require and has to cut down when you write, or are you a person who sort of has to like pad in the the editing and the revisions or the drafts?
To this point, what I tend to write very clean first drafts.
Oh.
So
I do not.
So
they're getting better. Sorry.
Typically, the draft, when I start for the day, I'll go back and look at what I did the previous day, partially to remind myself, because sometimes when I'm writing, I enter sort of a fugue state, like a flow state, and I may not remember all of what I've written, but also to look back through and do quick edits and go back over and see, does this work? Does that make sense? Or if I know that I've gone wrong in the previous scene, sometimes I'll lie in bed if I'm really involved in a manuscript, and I'll be trying to go to sleep like a normal person, and then I'll think, oh God, I went wrong. Like that last scene, he should have reacted differently in that scene. So then I'll fix that first and then move on. I'm not a fast drafter. I draft relatively quickly once I start, but so by the time I make it to the end, most of these things I've gone over. It typically, occasionally I have to insert an extra chapter or two, but typically what's there is what's going to be there. I may have to revisit certain chapters to sort of change the dynamic, but generally my intent with doing that is to try to preserve as much as I can of what's already there and tweak it with with as little work as possible on my part.
Come on, I mean,
And
the
it's
dream, right?
usually small changes can make a huge difference
Yes.
sometimes. I mean, sometimes you just have to throw stuff out, but a lot of times you just need like a paragraph here and there and a bit of change in dialogue or body, you know, what's
Sentence or two.
can make a huge difference in how something reads.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. What about you?
I mean, I tend to write not quite enough in the first draft, and then I'll also have notes to myself like, you have to check this transition, like especially with emotional transitions too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did they go from being angry and into each other's throats to being, you know, purring at each other practically. I write about cats apparently, and you know, so and sometimes it'll be a little bit filled in. Like, I'll have certain words that I want
Mm-hmm.
to be in there that I know will probably ease it. But a lot of the time, you know, I'll look at that and I'll think, oh, I finished a draft. This is so great. And then I'll look back and it's this weird patchwork, you know, and it needs like an extra this. And I also genuinely hope sometimes that like, oh, I hope that I can, you know, add an extra 1,000 words right there, and it's usually like 2 sentences, just like you said, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm screwed. Guess this is gonna be another novella. Okay.
Like it or not.
Yeah. So I am one of those people, like, I try to plot, because that's the thing that I run out of. I love writing a character, but you know, sometimes I'm just like, oh, but plot.
Plot is a perennial challenge for me.
Yeah. It's I don't know how all this stuff happens to people, apparently. And so, you know, and then I'll be like, oh, I better put some of that
Well,
in.
I think for me, the parts that I remember from most books are usually the language, either that it's funny or it's lyrical, or and the characterization. I don't tend to remember plot. So I think because I'm not reading for plot, it's very easy for me to forget that other people might appreciate plot amongst sex and banter. So I always have to remind myself. It's very demanding.
See, like,
it's very demanding.
Yes. I also tend to read more for like character. That's the thing, character, prose style. You know, I'm very sensitive to that. And so when people say, "Oh, I didn't like it because it just didn't move fast enough," or maybe not that, but I didn't like it because like certain stuff didn't happen. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, but what wasn't the way this was described so beautiful? And yeah, I mean,
and different people read for different things.
Exactly.
So
yes.
I mean, I've said this before on Twitter, but it is one of the guiding lights for me through writing and publishing. Is that when Emma Barry told me, you can write the best possible version of what you do, like what your voice is, the sort of stories you tell. You could write the platonic ideal of that. And there are going to be people who hate it.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be people who hate your favorite books. You know, it's occasionally heartening to go into Goodreads and look at your favorite books and see people like who loathe them. And it's not that it's not schadenfreude. It's actually more of a reminder that there are books out there for everyone, but it means that your book is not going to be for everyone. It doesn't matter how well you do it. And I'm not saying my books, I mean, there are things that can be improved. I try to level up. I spent those 2 years without not publishing, trying to level up in my descriptions, in my point of view work, a lot of things, right? Emotion. In emotion, I spent those 2 years trying to make myself a better writer. But it means that even if I do the best I can do, there are going to be people who hate it. And it's hard, but...
How did you do it, by the way? Did you like look at craft books, or else was it just the practice of writing?
I'm contrary.
Okay.
I don't read craft books.
Okay.
Um,
I don't really either.
I don't. I own several of them, and
Oh, same.
I'm glad to contribute to the coffers of those authors.
My good intentions TBR
Yeah.
pile is full of craft
I
books.
am very contrary. There's a reason it's in my bio. When people tell me to do something a certain way, my automatic reaction is, and excuse me, I guess this just went graphic. It's like, fuck you, I'll do it my way. And I've been reading romance since I was 6 or 7, like adult romance.
Mhm.
And a lot about it, I think, is the beats of it, I think, are pretty well ingrained, which is not to say
Yes.
that all my books are good and cannot use improvement. But I think in general, the way I've tried to improve, if you think I have,
I do.
well, thank you, is
Not that they were bad to begin with, but like honestly, I've just I'm in awe.
Well, that's sweet. I think excited to read yours too. Is that for description, I forced myself to write, and I'm still thinking about revising this. I wrote a 100,000 word futuristic Gothic romance, which Gothic is all about atmosphere and description, and a woman alone in a manor where she's searching out things, and things are creepy and it's mysterious. So you know what there's not a lot of? Sex, typically, and banter. There's not banter. So I forced myself to write entire chapters with no dialogue. I love dialogue. So I had to describe, it was all about describing what she was doing and what she was seeing, and trying to make that description rich and also engaging enough that the reader would want to continue reading even without the things that are my crutches, to be blunt. Like sex scenes, I think, like are not typically have not been that hard for me if I'm in the right mood. And banter is, I love doing banter and dialogue. So I was forcing myself basically to practice for an entire 100,000 words and try to make it the best I could. And I think that was, I'm not saying that I necessarily succeeded, but I do think my descriptions are better now than they were before I did that. Point of view, I reread all of Joanna Bourne's books.
Oh, that's
Right before I wrote Teach Me, like literally right before, and that was
Huh.
deliberate, because I was not worried about cross-contamination of voices, because her voice and her stories, I mean,
Yes.
French Revolution spies, it's just not what I do, and I can't think like she thinks, but all of her characters, whatever they think, whatever they see, what they notice, all of it is so grounded in who they are, their personalities, and their past. She is so deeply in their point of view that I reread her books as a reminder that like get your shit together, Olivia. Like you need to do more of this, because you need to be deeply grounded in who that person is, in the metaphors that they would use, in what they would see and what they would not see. And I found her, like, she is for me a masterclass in point of view. And then emotion, that was writing Cover Me for the Rogue Anthology.
That was such a
But
good story.
That's the first contemporary book I'd written where I made no attempt to be funny. I mean, there may be like a couple lines there but the story that I wanted to tell about health insurance and about breast cancer, which is a big thing in my family history, right?
Mhm.
This is not a story that was meant to be slapstick or bantery, because you have a woman who's scared literally for her life and for health, and her friend of however many years, and pining. And it was a scary story for me to write, because first of all, in 18,000 words, I was very careful with word choice in a way that I wasn't always, because I had to fit a story within a limited span of time, so I had to be very careful about what I showed on page, what I went back and said, well, this just happened, so forth. But also leaning hard into emotion and trying not to be scared of that. Because it's very easy to feel like, oh, I'm being sloppy and sentimental. But just saying, fuck it. Like, this is the story I want to tell. It is meant to be emotionally wrenching.
And that is such a perfect story, I would say, too. It is like, it hits so many, like, notes in the reader. And I also want to say that I think that both of us probably tend to default to humor when we feel
Yes.
uncomfortable.
Yes.
And, you know, and it's very tempting sometimes.
It is.
That story doesn't do that. It is just the scene where she confronts the politician at the town hall is I cried buckets. It is so good. And then just the whole story is
Well,
wonderful.
thank you. I'm tearing up now.
Oh.
But I mean, that was a story where I was like, I am going to lean hard into emotion and not be scared of it.
Yes.
Or even if
It's
I'm
so
scared,
scary.
I'm going to do it anyway.
It's
And
scary.
not try to undercut it with humor.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have to believe that it won't be ridiculous. Even if I'm trying to be emotional, that it's not silly. Because, you know, and so I think that, like the futuristic Gothic for description, that was for me like trying to push myself. And again, you can disagree about whether I managed it, but that was my intent. So, I mean, was there anything that you sort of specifically worked on over the 2 years, or is it more sort of getting a better sense of who you were and the sort of stories you wanted to tell during that time?
I mean, I would like to say that I spent it all working really hard.
Oh, I spent months doing nothing.
I would say that it was, I mean, you know, there's just a lot of soul searching. I feel like every day, at a certain point, I do ask myself, is this the right work for me? You know, is this the right genre? Should I even be doing this at all?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is this making it? It's like, it's not really making that much money. It's also, is this making me happy enough to continue? So I think that maybe instead of working on technical skills and just sort of soul search, I do think my writing has changed like a little bit. I do feel like I am trying to embrace like not joking,
Right.
too.
I noticed that.
Yeah. So it's hard. It is kind. If we want to talk about crutches, I think that's one of my crutches. You know, it's not that, you know, the books have no humor. It's just that it's there. It's always just like that little bite in a sentence maybe, but it's maybe not in the dialogue or as much in the dialogue anymore. It's just hard to say. I'm the worst evaluator of my own work anyway, so, you know.
Your work is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
I think for me,
Mm-hmm.
I think I assumed that the reason people were reading my books was only because of the humor. And so it was scary for me to remove it and sort of see, and in some ways Cover Me was a good venue for me to experiment because it was one novella in an anthology, so if it flopped, so be it, right? But that was I think part of what was scary for me is like, people actually like my writing without humor? Is my writing actually strong enough to carry a story without humor? And I mean, I think that hopefully what we're both finding is yes, you know, that the humor is great, and I love an element of the farcical even in my more serious books other than Cover Me, but it's not necessary. Your books are fantastic with or without like open humor. I also noticed you went for you're doing some older characters like I have been, correct?
Yeah, I guess in playing House, they're in their later 30s, and in House Rules, which will be out in February, they're in their 40s.
Right.
You know, I if you might not know this, I am also aging.
You're not a vampire.
I'm not a vampire.
I had
I wear a
thought.
lot of black, but
I had thought.
you know, I was thinking about this the other day. Somebody was really, really wanted to know if I wrote about myself, and I was just like, no, I really don't, you know. But I do think that I write about people who I would like to be friends with, and maybe that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do see my friends. Some have gotten divorced. Some have, you know, and they're out there, they're looking, you know, and they also have, and then they have great relationships too, and then, you know, all this happens. I also just, as I get farther from my 20s, you know, I also think I was such an, you know, and this is not true of any of the people in my 20s that I know. They're actually really smart and great, but also, you know, I personally was kind of an idiot throughout that entire era and maybe into my early 30s. So I'm just like,
Right.
you know, I do write about people who fail a lot. That's the other thing.
I do too.
Yeah, and I
Who
love
have to
that.
switch directions.
Switch directions.
Because of failures
Mhm.
or, yep, I do that too. I think that's part of what engages me about your work too. Maybe
Yes.
because I have also failed and had to switch directions.
Same here.
Yes.
You know? Yeah, that was in the one with the red cover. Oh God, Angie and
Oh, My Reckless Valentine.
oh my God, that was Grant.
Yeah.
Grant was such a sweetheart, by the way. I love him, but you know he fails in his work, and he's sort of coming back and he's regrouping, you know. And I loved that. I read that and I just ate it up. I was just like, I know it's I'm just like losing all my words here, but failure is so interesting because I do feel like we do embrace winners a lot in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the idea of switching directions is really scary. I don't like change. God.
Yeah.
Ugh. And so, you know, when it has to happen, you know, it's such a personal upheaval. It challenges your entire feeling of what your identity is.
Mhm.
And it's so great to just read stories where that has happened with the characters and they
And
find
that there is
wonderful-
life
Yes,
after that.
Exactly.
And a good life
A
after
good
that.
life.
After that. And that they can look at who they are and what they want now and find something else. It is
Mhm.
not the end. You know? That it's an ending to something they once thought would be their future,
Mhm.
but there is something beyond that and it can
Yes.
be good.
Yes. That is
You know, it will have an HEA.
so hopeful. Yes. Love that.
Right. I have no idea what we were supposed to be
I don't
writing
know.
about anymore. Do you want to? Sorry, did I interrupt anything else you want to say?
No. I think we should probably skip ahead. That's
I think
what
we
think.
probably should.
This is long.
Do you want to do number? What do you want to go to? I think we
let's do
skip
lightning
7.
round.
Do lightning round?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just.
Okay.
try
So
not
here we
to-
go.
Oh dear. Let's look at this first question.
All right. So first question. This is submitted by Mia Sosa, who is cruel. Also, she
Stirring up trouble.
She
Mia.
is, and she knows it, but she does know that I have very firm opinions about this. So, the question is:
This is not going to be lightning at all. Like the first question is going to be like.
who? We may be in agreement on this. We'll
I
see.
think we are though.
Who played Mr. Darcy the best?
Okay. Here's my confession. See, it's not lightning at all. I don't love Colin Firth.
If I were able to do pratfalls, my back is hurting. Hashtag old. If I were able to do pratfalls right now, I would have actually fallen to the floor just out of dramatics. But you don't love Colin Firth in general, or specifically in this, in the BBC adaptation?
If my ideal adaptation is probably, and if we're gonna go with human beings, I guess Wishbone would be number one. Kidding. I think, and I realize they probably wouldn't have that much chemistry either. And I do, but I feel feel like the BBC Jennifer Eel, is that her name?
Yes.
And Matthew McFadden would be such a good combination. I like his. Okay, now I'm gonna get in real trouble. Nobody will love me after this. But okay,
I'll still love you.
I feel like he has such a good voice, Matthew McFadden.
He does.
And
is it McFadden or Fadian?
McFadden, I don't know.
I think it's Fadian.
Okay,
I mean, that may be wrong, but
I don't.
Whatever.
You know what?
Matthew M.
Matthew, you have a great voice.
Yeah.
Totally watching this.
Clearly.
No.
No one else has ever analyzed this before.
No. Never. Total original.
He's gonna totally Google like, what do random romance writers think of my adaptation of Pride and Prejudice?
Long ass video.
I have nothing better to do with my time than to go to 50 minutes into a video. Find it out. Anyway, okay.
Oh,
So
Olivia.
Jennifer Eel and Matthew McFadden.
Maybe. That's
Maybe?
probably, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I love Laurence Olivier too, but I think he's totally
I love-
wrong in that.
Oh, and Greer Garson was gorgeous, but she's clearly not Lizzie's age.
She's not Lizzie's age.
And she's too self-possessed, I
She's
think.
so, she mugs a little. I'm sorry, Greer, I love you.
She's
mugs a
gorgeous. She
little
is
bit.
gorgeous. Her
She's so
outfit's
beautiful.
totally inappropriate
Wrong,
to the time.
wrong,
But
wrong.
beautiful, but
Beautiful.
inappropriate to the time.
I don't know how you made skinny old Laurence Olivier look like he's like, I don't know, like a partridge or
Jowling?
something. I don't know how they did that.
Yeah.
It's the wrong outfit too. Anyway,
Sorry. My favorite adaptation
Mhm.
is the Matthew McFadden one. But it
Yes.
it very much goes along with the sort of heroes I write. Because Matthew McFadden's, the take on the character in that version is not necessarily that he may have be proud or whatever, but at its heart, it's not that he's a dick. It's that he's socially awkward.
socially
And he doesn't know what to do. And like, to me, that is much more endearing as a hero than a dude who's just sort of convinced that he is amazing and then has to learn otherwise. Like, that's a good story too. But for me, Matthew McFadden's arc is much more the sort of hero I like to read and write. And I found him absurdly, his eyes and
The way they dart
when
back
he
and
smiles,
forth. Yes.
and when he smiles with his sister in that scene, yeah,
And when he panics, like sort of a little bit in the ballroom, like his eyes
Yeah.
just sort of do this, like, oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by people thing. That is, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's very good.
So that is my favorite version, Mr. Darcy. Okay, the rest of these should be
Zip.
That's a really long lightning storm. I feel like meteorologists around the world are like, what the hell is up with that lightning? It lasted 7 minutes.
Who the hell does it? Okay.
Dog or cat?
Oh, God. This is the worst lightning round in the history of the
We
world.
can skip it.
Okay, dog. Cat. Dat. There.
I can barely take care of myself and
I
my
know,
daughter.
right?
So they're lovely and bless you for having pets, but neither. Hot or cold? I guess as far as temperature outside.
Cold.
Cold. You can always put on more clothes. At a certain point, you can no longer strip off more without getting public indecency charges. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Yeah, I mean, I love sweets, but I mean, I love food of all sorts,
Same.
but
I do.
probably, I think I've grown more into savory as I've gotten older, I would say. Cheese or chocolate?
I just said savory, and then I'm going to pick chocolate, aren't I?
Mhm.
Sorry. I'm a complicated woman.
You
Cheese
are.
or chocolate?
You contain multitudes of
Yes.
chocolate. So, it depends on the type of cheese and the type of chocolate. I actually don't eat a ton of chocolate, but I do love Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and Snickers bars, which they have in Sweden, the American versions. So it
Oh,
tastes
good.
exactly like what I remember, and that is very comforting to me. So I eat more candy in Sweden than I ever did in the US. I eat less dessert, but more candy because of those two things. It satisfies something that most things are. The food in Sweden is great, but most of it doesn't taste like. It tastes like itself, and it's amazing. But occasionally, if you want something that tastes like exactly what you want, what you remember,
That's important.
then
Yeah.
it feeds something in you, both literally and figuratively. Then
Mhm.
I think the next one's too complicated.
Okay.
So I mean, unless you want to.
I can't even read that.
Okay, good. Cake or pie?
Cake.
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 Frosting.
Frosting.
I occasionally with pie if it has a crumb topping on it,
Yeah.
but cake.
I don't like cooked fruit. Sorry. I don't really like jam either, if that makes you feel better. I know I have
Mhm.
terrible taste. Go on.
No, it's okay. Smooth peanut butter or crunchy?
Both.
Smooth.
Okay.
I'm bothered by the bits. Bath or shower?
I mean, I love a shower. I also like baths, but shower.
I get impatient in baths. I think it's going to be this like relaxing experience,
Mhm.
and then I'm there for like 5 minutes. And like, I'm hot now. Like, what am I doing in here? And then I'm like, no, shower. Also, I feel weird because then when you start washing, then there's soap in the water, and then the water's
Yeah.
not clean. And then what's the point of it? Really, what is the point?
It might also not be, I think that for people who like baths, it might not be the clean thing.
No,
it might
I
just
think
sort of be the sitting.
Maybe
in the
I'm
water
just too
thing.
utilitarian about the whole thing.
I like showers though. I genuinely just,
Yeah.
it's like so good and nobody can really disturb you. Lock shower.
Nice. City or country?
City. I don't drive, by the way, so that really, really limits my options in the country.
Yeah. I would say I'm gonna go off the suburbs for me.
Oh, okay.
I don't like crowds. Crowds make me very kind of twitchy. I find them.
Coming to you from Times Square.
I know.
New York.
I know. I mean, like we're here at RWA. I meet people one-on-one. I do not do group things because it just.
That's
If
smart.
I'm going to be around a lot of people, I see them one-on-one and I feel much better about it in the end. But no, I don't like crowds. So not cities, but I lived in a rural area and there are certain things that most rural areas, there are certain problematic aspects. There tend to be a sort of insularity, not in all places, so please forgive me. There tends to be more diversity than perhaps we see on the page sometimes, but less diversity than you find in cities. And there tends to be, cities are just more liberal, and I'm liberal. So I would say I want to be not in a huge city, but somewhere where there is a diverse population, access to good restaurants, and a certain sense of wanting to engage with a larger world and issues of justice. Does that?
Yeah.
I would say that's what I would say.
Okay. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, and I really felt much more comfortable in the city. Also, just because I think that the suburbs I grew up in didn't have a lot of other Asian people.
Okay.
And so when I came here, I have to say, I went to, in the first week I was here, I went to the Met, and there are people speaking Taiwanese, which is the dialect that my family speaks, but in the larger community that I've been in, most people speak Mandarin. So I was convinced that I was actually related to them. There are 30 million people in Taiwan, by the way, and also some people in China who speak this dialect, and so a lot of people speak it, actually, but
you had not been connected to those people.
Everybody whoever spoke that dialect was a relative. So I followed them around for a little bit, like a weird little stalker.
That sounds like a really powerful.
It was, and then I found all these pockets of communities here, where So it was just kind of a revelation when I came here. Just
Mhm.
I didn't stand out at all, and that was really important to me. And it still kind of is. So anyway,
Mhm.
but yeah, city.
That makes total sense. I don't think I can choose my best Twitter
Oh my
follow. So,
God, that's
um,
yeah.
how did we meet? I don't on Twitter, but
Yeah.
I don't know at what point.
It was a couple of years ago.
It was a few years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember your books coming out, so it was
I don't.
probably it was probably it was probably around 2015,
Maybe
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's we met on Twitter.
And I remember your books coming out.
So
And
I mean, it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's been at least probably since 2015, I would think.
Yeah.
Um, what job would you like if you weren't writers? I would like to be the younger daughter of a potentate, a benevolent potentate, where I could do whatever I wanted all day and not have to worry about money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know, but not be corrupted by wealth. Good luck. This seems like a valid career option, doesn't it?
Put in that resume. Don't let your lack of qualifications.
My lack of
stop you.
potentate family
Relative,
members,
exactly.
benevolent.
If I were actually good at it, I think I would like to be a musician, piano teacher. Like not like a crowd screaming at my feet or anything like that, but yeah, something like that.
In all seriousness, I would probably go back to teaching. It was an overwhelming amount of work, but it is, writing and teaching are the most viscerally satisfying things that I've done. Do we write with music on or in silence or other? Ooh.
I do not write with music on. I have tried. Because some people say that it's great. I have a lot of city noise around me usually. I sometimes write at the library, so I also have a lot of people to stare at. But anytime I've tried to write with music, I have just listened to the music and also, started looking for other music. And so I'm easily distracted. Yes, no music, silence.
I don't multitask well, and even when I was growing up, I would do homework in a quiet room. So I prefer as quiet as possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but I mean, we got in our apartment, we specifically looked for a space I could use as an office with a door. Because I live with two extroverts, but it's hard for me even to write when they're home. I do occasionally, but I usually by far am more productive when I'm just by myself in a quiet house.
That is what I long for. I wish I had an office, to tell you the truth. Yeah, it's my own fault for living here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love an office.
Traditional or self-pubbing? I mean, I've done both now. I think that there are certainly that could take another hour. So I'm just going to sum up by saying I think that there are certainly benefits to both. I think optimally I would want to be hybrid. I don't know if it'll work out that way, but optimally I would like to be hybrid.
I guess I've only done traditional.
I guess
feels like it's
Rogue
not.
Axe was kind of, but that was a little, because we bless them. There's people who, Tamsin Parker,
Yes.
AJ Cousins, and Zoe York essentially took care of everything for us.
Yes.
So it was a very gentle dip into self-publishing.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be good at it. I mean, I think I probably will try at some point in my life, but right now.
If you ever, anything I know, I'd be.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have said that off camera. But anything I know, just ask me. Okay.
Thank you. I do worry that I do not have the attention span required because, they're details. And I used to be a detail person, and I do not have a detail brain anymore, unfortunately. And I really feel sad about that. But anyway, hybrid at some point, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know. Do you want to do the Chris's question or keep moving?
I hardly can tell them apart.
I don't know. It depends on which one seems the most
I heard Pratt's really terrible, so
Yeah, I would say Pratt is off. It's Snog, Mary, Kill out of all the Chris's. Um, I've heard Chris Payne is a recent addition to
who's
the
Chris Payne?
P-A-N-G.
P. Oh, okay.
Did I miss?
No, I think that's right. I was just.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm a fan of. I'm generally a fan of Hemsworth, Pine, and Evans. Those are the three that I think seem, you know, Hemsworth maybe just for the sheer physicality of him and the. But the other two because they seem self-aware, and you know.
Oh, I saw this little video of Chris Evans' butt basically the other day.
Oh,
and
nice.
And it was
Was it quality?
So it was
quality butt.
And sometimes I'm unmoved by these things curiously, but this one was very, very genuinely touched my soul. So I would say, the butt of Chris. Oh gosh.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, how many notebooks do you own?
I don't know. Lots.
I made myself stop like 5 years ago because I don't really. I grew up from the age of 9. We had a computer at home, and so at that point I started composing on a computer when I write. So basically, I do sometimes when I'm formulating stories, I'll make initial notes on a notepad, but it's usually just a legal pad. Like I have all these beautiful half dozen beautiful journals, and like they're gorgeous, and I never use them. I use a legal pad. So like I'm just collecting them now. So at a certain point I had to stop, particularly now we live in an apartment that's less than half the size of the house we used to live in. I don't have room for that shit. I just don't. I don't have shelf space. So
Yeah, I know. I understand. Believe me. I have notepads. I have maybe like a couple of journals. I like them a lot, and so I will buy them for my child and pretend it's for my
yes.
She does get them and she does use them.
Just as my husband buys electronics for the child.
Right. I am one of those people who, I'll get up in the middle of the night and I'll grab whatever piece of paper I can.
Yeah,
so I have like
notepad.
and it's a notepad and I'll write something.
Yeah.
So.
When I'm really into a story, that's how I know actually that my brain is fully engaged in a story, that things will come to me at night when I'm lying down in the middle of the night, like different things that they could say or things that I did need to recalibrate or things. That's how I know, is that my brain is still working on it, even when I'm not consciously thinking about it. And if that's not happening, then typically it's a problem. So, do we want to do which of your heroines most resembles you?
Okay, sure. I did not think about that. Which of your you know what? Which of your heroines most resembles you?
They all have a piece of me.
Yeah.
I mean, now of course, basically all my heroines are fat, and so there's that. I think that little pieces of me are scattered through all of my heroes and heroines.
What are some of the details, would you say, that are a little bit of it?
Teach me.
Okay.
I'm a former high school teacher. There is a lot from Teach Me that is, like, I didn't have a dick of a supervisor. Well, the year before I left, this is what I will say, is the year before I taught AP US and Honors World History. I met my husband in 2006, and I had to make a decision about whether to teach another year or move to be with him in Maryland. And I found out from my supervisor she was taking away my Honors World History classes.
Oh.
And
this is deeply felt in this book.
When I first started, my first year teaching AP US History, I had 40 kids in the class. And I taught 3 periods of Honors World History. And the next year, my initial class rolls were over 100 kids in my AP US History classes. We had over 30 kids in each class. And that entire number was my Honors World History kids who had followed me. And to this day, it is my proudest thing I've ever done in my entire life. The publishing doesn't compare to it. Nothing compares to that feeling that, like, those kids trusted me enough to do that. I will, to this day, it's been 13 years. And I will say that that was the deciding factor for me to leave and go be with my husband, because I was so heartbroken that had happened. And it happened for reasons, not the same reasons as in the book, but other reasons that I also resented. And so so that book is in part dedicated to those kids, because I loved those kids so much. And obviously, sorry.
Yeah.
But so that part is actually directly, which is why it's so convoluted. People reading the story were like, I don't understand the U.S. educational system. And it's such such a specific form of conflict that, like, this particular class was, it is convoluted.
That is what is so good, though. The specificity of the conflict. Also, I know that, maybe that's what makes it so real, too.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I guess I had some 13-year-old axes to grind.
Yeah.
But it's still like, so that's, yeah. So that part of me, that part of my life is there's a lot in Teach Me. I'm not Rose. You can tell just by looking at what I'm wearing. I'm not Rose. But there is a lot about the experience of teaching and the specific subject areas. And history, because I'm a historian by training, and the sense of the marginalization of different marginalized groups in history, and the importance of studying them and understanding their experiences. That is 100% me on that page, for better or worse. Sorry, this is meant to be lightning round, but again, meteorologists are like scratching their heads and wondering what's happening.
Storm front settled right over the Marriott.
Yes.
Let's see. The complicated family relationships that almost all of my heroines have. I have very complicated relationships with my family. Again, my heroines are not me. There are little things too. I tend to put runners in my story, like people who run. And I don't do that anymore, but it was a big part of my life. At some point, my husband still is like, he's like a gazelle. It's combinations of little things. Like, I think in the first book, somebody remarked on the fact that, I can't even remember my own character's name, is Petra, in Acute Reactions, that she sometimes has these, one vegetable dinners, like she'll like eat a bowl of lima beans and that's it. And I that's just something that I had from that I did in my early 30s a lot. I can't do this now because I have a child.
Right.
But that's probably a lot better for me. Things like that. Actually, now that I think about it, in Playing House, the heroine doesn't have a hugely complicated relationship with her parents, but the hero does, and that was really interesting to write that anyway. But yeah, it's little things that you just like little personality things that sometimes just get scattered all over the books. Our lives are so rich, that it's always little things that end up in there.
Right. Just to say, I laugh easily and I cry easily. It doesn't mean that like something is terribly wrong. I didn't used to, but like over the years
Same.
Emotions are closer to the surface, and I think I'm not deflecting with humor in real life always in the same way that I did when I was younger.
Same.
So,
yeah.
Yes. So I think the next one's too complicated.
Okay.
Favorite comfort reread?
Oh gosh, that changes a lot.
It does.
Um,
What's your current one then?
my current one, I guess I just reread the last Innkeeper book by Ilona Andrews,
Okay.
and I've read it a couple of times. And yeah, but it does change a lot. I'll reread, Sherry Thomas, or I reread Loretta Chase for sort of compulsively for a really long time when I was first sort of reading romance again. What about you?
If we're doing actual published work, then probably the Joanna Bourne
Oh yeah.
books, especially the Forbidden Rose and the Black Hawk, and her novellas. I think she writes very good novellas too, and I just find them really just gorgeous. Non-published in recent weeks, it has been. I tweeted about this that I've just gotten a fanfic the last 3 or 4 months, and there is an 170,000 word fanfic
Holy.
about I've never watched Game of Thrones. I didn't have HBO. Like, I'm only interested in the Jamie Brienne fandom, right? And I don't watch football because of brain injuries. I sort of stopped entirely watching that. There's also other issues with the NFL and otherwise, but there was the brain injury thing that I have a hard time watching now. I've never done fantasy football, know nothing about it. There is a 170,000 word Game of Thrones fan fiction called Stannis Baratheon, Fantasy Football League Commissioner, that is entirely told through chat messages for all these Game of Thrones characters to each other within this alternative modern universe where they keep their funniest character traits, and it's all in these message boards. It is hilarious. I didn't even know most of these characters. Now I have a better sense, and it's even more hilarious now that I know what it is. And I read this, again, this is the woman who can only read novellas for a longest time. 170,000 freaking words about a fantasy football league. Although, as the writer said, it was the fantasy football league was only a plot device. It could have been Monopoly. It could have been anything competitive that would allow these interactions to occur. I was crying laughing. There's a scene of what they call surprise oral, and I won't tell you more, but I was crying laughing. And there's also stuff with a Clarisonic that I can't even, but it is hilarious. It is a format that I love, epistolary sort of esque formats, and this is all in the chat, which is very basically the same thing, just with shorter, and it's genius. I love it. I've reread this 170,000 word fic 3 times in the past month because I just find it so amazing. Anyway, I don't really have a weirdest thing I've had to research because my characters aren't really that weird, so. Right. I mean, they are, but in more mainstream ways. Do you have a least favorite word?
Panties.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's important.
I'm trying to think if there's. I mean, I don't love moist, but that's true of many people. I don't love cum.
Yeah.
I can't. I can still read stuff that have it. I'm not offended by it, but I would never use it myself.
Obviously, I have to read the word panties a lot.
Yes.
And it doesn't make me put down a book, but I don't love it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Time period where I would like to write a book? If we didn't do contemporary.
Oh, that's a good question. I love these 20s books that are coming out. I would also love to read some sort of 50s book.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see Asian American, Asian Canadian characters in these.
Mm-hmm.
Anglo, Chinese, stuff like that. So.
At one time I would have said, because my background again was as a historian, I did American colonial history, worked at Colonial Williamsburg for a number of years. It's what I have my master's degree in. I might have said then, except that I don't think you would have to really discuss slavery. I mean, you can't portray that world without slavery being part of it, which is not to say that you can't have a romance, very satisfying romance. I mean, look at Alyssa Cole's work. I mean, that does, involving enslaved people and those sorts of issues. It is that I don't think that I am equipped to be the person or should be the person to write the story necessarily that has that. So what I would say is I think at some point I will. I have written futuristic because I think that suits me, also suits me because of my anxiety issues. And as a historian, the reason I didn't write historical, even though my background is as a historian, is because I was so concerned about getting the details right that I was worried that I would never write anything at all. And so I wanted to take away that anxiety barrier. So I think future. Do you want to do maybe the tropes questions?
Tropes. Romance tropes that never get old. Oh, you know what? I love tropes. This is the thing. There are a lot of people who don't, who stay away from certain ones, and I have to say, if the author is the right author, I will just read that and not have any qualms about it. Even Secret Baby, I will read Secret Baby. If it's the right author, I will just, I'll pick it up. It's more about how it's written, for me.
I love friends to lovers, pining heroes, starchy heroes, heroes that, those are often my favorite things. I love enemies to lovers. I love it when there's like that masquerade thing. Yeah,
I love that.
Pretending to be something that they're not.
Those are so good.
I love that. If we do sprints, word count or block of time.
What does that mean, actually? Like, do we stop our sprint?
Oh, I knew what this one was.
Okay.
Which is like if I'm checking in with a friend and we're writing surf together virtually, there are some people who say like, how many words did you get at the end of the hour? I do not do that.
Me neither.
I do block of time.
That's good.
We'll check in on the hour and we'll say, I'll say I made some progress, because to me it's a lot of pressure, and often a lot of people write a lot faster, many more words than I do per hour, and then I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I've clearly made bad life decisions. So it's better just to do, the important part is you were working.
Yeah.
To me. For me. For other people that's very inspiring to do the word count.
Yes.
That works for them.
Yes.
That does not work for me.
Word count can sometimes send me into a little spiral of self-hatred. So I tend to actually, do the block of time. And if it works for you, it's great. That's so good. It does not work for me.
Right. I think we need to choose maybe one or two more.
Because we're running
Okay,
out of time.
so look at the rest of them and see whether there's any of these that particularly appeals to you.
Where do you write, Olivia?
I write in my office.
That's nice. What's your office like?
It's not big. But I have a big ass desk
Nice.
that I love,
Mhm.
and I have a desktop computer, and and I have a couple of my daughter's drawings.
Oh, that's
So even if I'm ignoring my family, I can still feel like
sure.
they're close to me, and it needs to be relatively orderly. Like, I'm not necessarily a huge neatnik, but my office needs to be relatively orderly, or else I have trouble with that. Where do you write?
I have a nice desk unfortunately, in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
I do wish for an office, as I've said before, as if, maybe a fairy godmother out there can, poof one into my tiny apartment for me. I love the desk, and it is not super neat, but, I know where stuff is. I do tend to focus kind of on my screen, so it's kind of funny that I even really think I need an office, because
nice
like
to
I put
close the door.
The door thing is probably the big thing. I have like a board that I put up that I thought I would put inspirational things on. I just don't pay attention to it at all.
Yeah.
I work in the library a lot, the public library, the New York Public Library. Yay. I did not think I'd be able to focus there. Turns out I'm really much better there than at my desk a lot of the time. So
That's good.
yeah, it's just mostly like even though I know it's good for me, getting myself to go, like, lug the computer out the door, into the elements, sit myself down. Yeah.
Do we want to do the final one?
Yeah, let's do the final one.
Because this one I have a clear answer.
Okay.
Oxford comma, yes or no? Hell yes. Because otherwise there's too much room for confusion. I mean, it's like, meet my father, Emma and,
Right.
Hillary Clinton. And then you're like, Emma and Hillary Clinton are your father? You need the comma. You need the second comma. It's just, to me, it's ridiculous that not everyone uses it. What about you?
I believe in the Oxford comma. I, for the record, am terrible with commas, but I do know that you do need the Oxford comma, and I do like more clarity. I am always in favor of more clarity.
I'm an Oxford comma enthusiast. One might say I'm militant about the Oxford comma. And in fact, if I ever write, I'm contemplating doing, a couple people asked about Candy and Teach Me, the English teacher who's like super intense. And I was thinking I might do like a short little thing, and that it would be, sorry, we're out of time, but it might be a guy who like romances her by like getting her enraged about linguistic issues, like, but that he would just, even though he also believes in the Oxford comma, he would argue that it's not necessary.
Oh, what a shit. Oh, I don't know if I like him anymore.
I don't know. I haven't, or maybe that will be what they agree on. Maybe that will be what they agree on, and that there are other things that they can disagree on, like splitting infinitives and ending sentences with prepositions. Those, because she's going to hold a hard line on those, and he is going to argue convincingly, I think, why that's being too rigid. And that'll be how he romances her, is through bickering about linguistics.
I love it.
Because I know what bestsellers are made of.
This has been Anatomy of a Bestseller.
All right. I think we've talked long enough. We have to
Yes.
go get lunch now.
Yeah.
So we're out. But thank you if anyone watches this, and if we can actually get it to upload somewhere.
Yeah, it's
so.
huge. So, yeah.
Good luck to us.
Thank you.
All right, bye.